it's Simeon here. Thanks again for visiting my YouTube channel. Happy to have you here today. I wanted to talk about some questions I had about my new book, Black Swan Ghosts. In the previous video, somebody asked a question, Simeon, why are you calling it Black Swan Ghosts? Don't you know what Black Swan events are? They're these rare, improbable events that have a disproportionately large impact, either positive or negative. Why are you putting ghosts in there? Well, yeah, that's the whole idea. If you haven't already read the book, The Black Swan, I really recommend you take a look at it. It's by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Now, I like all of Taleb's works. The Black Swan is about the impact of highly improbable events that you don't see coming, and they have a disproportionately large effect, specifically because the narrative that you've been using in your mind doesn't account for the fact that there are things that could happen that you don't expect them, and they have a really large impact, and it could be a good impact too, but you just don't see it coming. Well, in Europe, there used to be this idea that there were no black swans because all the swans in Europe were white until explorers went to Australia and they discovered black swans. And all of a sudden, that whole idea that swans were all white was shown to be false. And that's the whole idea behind this general concept, is until you find a counter factual, something that disproves what you thought, you're going to believe the narrative that you were taught by the society that you're in. And also, Taleb has also a couple other excellent books. Anti-Fragile, which is about things that gain from chaos and randomness and change. Very good book. And I think there's a newer one called Skin in the Game, which is also, I've read some excerpts from that. It's also really good. But the idea with my book is Black Swan Ghosts, is that not only do we have events that we don't expect to happen, like here in Boulder, there was this big flood in 2013, and it just rained for a week, and you probably maybe saw it on the news. There was a lot of damage to homes and the infrastructure. The water levels were really high. We were told later that was a 1 out of 1,000-year flood, later on revised to the idea there's 1 out of 500 years. So that's a black swan event. You don't expect that type of flood to happen except once every 500 years, which means there was no one alive who had ever seen that much water come down in a week. Maybe people had heard stories about it. Indigenous peoples might have been familiar with this, having lived here for hundreds of years. With our current modern society, no one had ever seen anything like that, and no one would expect it. Well, black swan ghost events are like that, except you don't even expect them to happen. You might not even find them believable. When I talk about this topic of people who I've encountered over the last 20 years who've encountered unidentified aerial craft, their occupants, humanoids associated with these craft, and other related phenomena like that, the first reaction of the average person would be, I don't even believe that's true. And that's why it's a black swan ghost event, because it's somewhere in the gray area of your mind where you're not even sure if it's real. Now, I'm sure you're not one of these people, because you wouldn't be looking at my YouTube channel unless you already had the idea that at least this was possible. So it's not going to be as much of a black swan event for you should all of these things that I write about here turn out to be quite real and maybe even commonplace, but something that we haven't talked about. But for the average person who's not familiar with this topic, and I'm sure you encounter some of these people, and I'm not being judgmental, it's just people who are not familiar with the evidence, their first reaction is, I just can't believe that could be true. There aren't UFOs, there are no alien craft or whatever these craft are. I don't think it's possible. No one told me it was possible. And the thing is, they would say, how do you know that these stories in here are true? And I would respond, how do you know they're not true? And I'm not saying that in a facetious way. I'm not saying that just to be kind of smart alecky. It's just that, let's say there are things that you don't think are true that turn out to be true after all, and you're wrong. And it's not that far-fetched. The sociologist Ron Westrom, who's written about this sort of topic, also mentions that before 1965, no one believed in child abuse either. Literally doctors, when they came and examined injured children who looked bruised, could not accept the idea that parents would ever do this to their children, and they created this idea that the children were falling out of trees. It was a result of bullies and things like this. And it wasn't until 1965 that a group of radiologists and doctors got together and people that study brain injury, and they put all the evidence together and they said, yes, parents are actually abusing their children. So even something that we now accept as commonplace as child abuse wasn't considered real even before 1965 when I was alive. If you go back further in history, we know that no one took the Wright brothers seriously in the United States for at least 5 to 8 years after they'd been seen flying. People could see their plane, experimental plane, up in the air around Huffman, Ohio, and other places in the fields, Kitty Hawk, and where they were testing this. And yet the mainstream media didn't believe it because they had asked Scientific American, and Scientific American had asked scientists, and they said it's not possible for heavier than air things to fly. So you kind of get the idea. Going back even further, meteorites weren't considered real in the late 1700s by the French Academy of Sciences. They confiscated all the meteorites because Aristotle had said there are no stones in the sky, nothing comes from the sky, and this is what Newton and Lavoisier and all the other preeminent scientists of the time believed, that there were no stones in the sky, so no stones could fall from the sky. So these were thought to be the result of, lightning hitting rocks on the ground and propelling them up in the air, so-called thunderstorms. In any case, common sense has been wrong in the past, and things that didn't seem likely to be true turned out to be true. So this is what we're saying with this sort of topic. The contact that people have with these unidentified aerial craft, it's been going on for at least 60, 70 years now, ever since World War II. It is not something that society at large considers to be real. It's not really talked about seriously. I've mentioned the citizen hearing on disclosure on 2013. I mean, there were like 40 witnesses there testifying under oath in front of retired Congress people and a senator. And really excellent testimony. And I feel that the quality of the witnesses that I interviewed for my book here are as good as the ones at the citizen hearing, because I've either gotten to know them very well or got to talk to them quite a bit. And what makes it ghostly is they've had this experience, but there's nowhere to go to talk about it. The authorities won't consider it to be something serious. They could be labeled as schizotypal, schizophrenic by the psychiatric community. So what's the incentive for these people to come forward? It could be exactly like the way child abuse was. Something that we're going to have a meeting about and decide is real. And until then, it's a ghostly topic because it's something that if you talk about really could destroy your career for good. It's a danger zone, a social danger zone, as I call it. And anyway, that's why the book's called Black Swan Ghosts. So I'm wondering if you've had your own Black Swan ghost encounter, and if you have, I'd be happy to hear about it sometime. Feel free to write some comments here in the box below, or just let me know one way or another. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll talk to you again another time. Take care for now, and bye.